Joseph is sitting at the corner of the table. He is eating alone and so alienated. The people there also ignore Joseph. They are busy joking around, but no one talks to Joseph. This is because Joseph is a son-in-law who lives in the house of his wife's family, the Smith family. Apart from having no wealth, Joseph has no position or dignity in the Smith family. Today is Mr. Barta Smith's birthday. The entire family was present to celebrate Mr. Barta's birthday. Many of them were looking forward to the opportunity to mock and insult Joseph. "Honey, please eat this pork soup," said Caddy, handing Joseph a bowl of pork soup. She is Caddy Smith, Joseph's wife, and Mr. Barta Smith's youngest daughter. Caddy's eldest sister, hearing that, immediately sneered, "Caddy, I made that pork soup, especially for our family, not for such a poor and useless person like Joseph." Hearing her eldest sister's words, Caddy put the bowl of pork soup back on the table. She looks down in shame. "What Jenny said is true," Mr. Barta Smith said, looking at Joseph with a condescending gaze. "Joseph, you've been in the Smith family for a year since you can't give me a grandchild yet. Then at least buy some expensive jewelry for my daughter. Who will know you? You don't even have a job. Every day you eat and sleep. You're useless," added Mr. Barta Smith. Caddy immediately replied to her father, "Dad, my husband is trying to find a job. We all know that all countries have been facing a COVID pandemic for a year. That's why it's hard to find a job." Mr. Barta Smith did not care about his youngest daughter's answer in defense of Joseph. The old man continued to say, "Joseph, my daughter marrying you was wrong. So I suggest you divorce my youngest daughter immediately. Caddy is still young. After her divorce, there will be another man who will marry her." Joseph clenched his fists angrily. His face looked annoyed, but he did not respond to his father-in-law's words. Because what Mr. Barta Smith said was true, Joseph was a useless person who only ate and slept. Even though he had been trying to apply for a job, no company would accept him. "Look at my other son-in-law, and Lucky just bought his wife expensive jewelry and a Bugatti La Voiture Noire. So, can a poor man like you be like Lucky?" Mr. Barta Smith looked seriously at Joseph. "A poor man like you can become rich like Lucky?" continued Mr. Barta. He asked Joseph a sarcastic question. Joseph's eldest brother-in-law, Lucky, was not wealthy. Even when he first married Jenny, he sometimes relied on Caddy's money to survive. When she was out, Caddy took her monthly savings to help her eldest sister, Jenny. If Caddy hadn't loaned her savings to Jenny and Lucky back then, the couple's life would have ended badly by now. Last year, Lucky took on a government project, from which he made millions of dollars, and his life began to improve. He bought a brand new BMW car and lived in an expensive apartment. Ironically, Lucky and Jenny's household, which had started to improve, now seemed to have forgotten Caddy's kindness. Whenever they meet, they always badmouth Joseph. "Dad, we're all family. Why do you say things like that?" Lucky smiled. He deliberately said that to pretend to defend Joseph. Then, Lucky says again, "Even though Joseph doesn't have any wealth and fancy cars, he's an unyielding person. That's why his future is so disgusting. Ha ha." Lucky laughed loudly, and everyone in the room laughed at Joseph too. "Joseph, I'm looking for security in my company. You can be the security there." "Ha ha ha," said Lucky. "Honey, how much salary will you give Joseph if he works as a security in our company?" asked Jenny while smiling condescendingly at Joseph.
$100.
"Because usually a poor person like him will get that salary." Ha ha ha. Lucky laughed again at the end of his sentence. When Lucky said that, everyone laughed again and looked at Joseph contemptuously. Joseph was gritting his teeth in anger, his eyes looking slightly reddened. Caddy's face also turned cold, and she couldn't stand it when people insulted her husband like this. Caddy almost wanted to protest against Lucky and Jenny because they were humans who didn't know what gratitude was. If it weren't for Caddy's help, they wouldn't be able to be like today. But, when Caddy wanted to speak like that, Joseph immediately extended his hand to prevent Caddy from gesturing to his wife not to speak. "By the way, today is your birthday, Dad," Lucky said. He takes out a small rectangular box, and when he opens it, there's a shiny lighter made of crystal. It looked very luxurious and expensive. This is a luxury lighter made of crystal. It must not be cheap. Lucky is truly a respectful son-in-law to his father-in-law. The families at the dinner table all praised Lucky. Lucky nodded and smiled proudly. I know Daddy is a smoker, so I bought him this match that cost hundreds of millions of dollars. Mr. Barda takes the luxurious lighter from Lucky, and then he plays with it in his hand while smiling with satisfaction. He looked at Joseph again with a sneer. Ha ha! Joseph, you're my son-in-law, but you're so useless. You're so different from Lucky. Today is my birthday. What did you bring for me? You can't give me any gift, right? Added Mr. Barda, further insulting Joseph. Everyone was staring at Joseph with sharp eyes. They keep on insulting Joseph as well. Dad, I also brought a gift for you, Joseph replied. Then Joseph took out a small box from his pocket and prepared to open it. I refuse your gift, said Mr. Barda as he looked at the small box in Joseph's hand with disgust. I don't want to receive gifts from a poor man like you, Mr. Barda added to Joseph. The small box was a pitch-black, slightly cracked wooden box that looked cheap. If Joseph gave such a cheap gift in front of all the family, it would embarrass Mr. Barda. That's why Mr. Barda refused Joseph's gift. Joseph was silent when his father-in-law rejected the gift he was about to give. Joseph kept his head down while still holding the gift. Keep the gift. What kind of gift can a poor man like you give? Mr. Bartu looked at Joseph sarcastically. If you give me an expensive gift like Lucky's, I'll accept it. However, if you give me a gift like that which is so cheap, of course, I'll refuse it because I don't want to be humiliated. You poor man. Mr. Barda's eyes were perfectly rounded as he stared at Joseph and insulted him. Ha ha! All the family laughed after Mr. Barda spoke. Caddy was furious at her father's words, but Joseph always forbade his wife to speak. So, Caddy could only remain silent while holding back her anger. After the birthday party was over, Joseph and Caddy returned to the room. Honey, I'm going to the office first. Take this money and go shopping. Caddy handed over a card. Regarding what my relatives said at the dinner table, please don't take it personally. Please do not take offense. At Mr. Barda's birthday celebrations, Joseph was constantly insulted by the relatives and families present. Caddy was afraid that Joseph would feel sad. So, Caddy gave Joseph some money for shopping so that Joseph would forget about the incident. It's okay, and I won't be offended by the insults they give me, honey. Joseph took the card and smiled. After Caddy left the room to go to the office, Joseph's cell phone suddenly vibrated. He took it out and saw an incoming message. Mr. Joseph, the family's ban on access to you has been lifted. From now on, you can use all your family assets. Your black card has also been reactivated. Joseph smiled at this. Joseph was a rich man's son. Even he did not know how rich his family was. But one thing Joseph remembered was that there was a monetary crisis 10 years ago. This crisis was like a flash flood that swept the world like a nightmare. It started in the United States, then went to Europe, Asia, Africa, and everything was affected. Many large financial institutions worldwide were closed or taken over by the government. Many factories went bankrupt, and their bosses could not pay employees' salaries. Tens of millions of people were laid off. At that time, Joseph was still a 14-year-old teenager. Joseph remembers that not long after the monetary crisis occurred, there were several people came to his house. There was a blonde man, then a brown man, an older man who still looked fit with a star on his shoulder, and a special policeman with a firearm who blocked the house. Joseph was young at the time, so he didn't understand anything. He only remembered that for 3 days, the atmosphere in his house was tense, with several special policemen guarding his house for 24 hours. The men left the Guez family residence, Joseph's house, 3 days later. They were carrying some documents and a letter of agreement. Joseph was still a teenager and couldn't do anything. He just looked at them and asked his father, "Dad, what did those people come here for?" Mr. Guez did not immediately answer his son's question but reached out and gently stroked Joseph's head. "Joseph, in this life, you have as much responsibility as you have property. You are the only son of the Guez family, And in the future, you will also be responsible for our family's wealth. You must remember, you must not spend your wealth for personal gain while your country is in distress. What's more, if our country and friends require help, we should lend a helping hand. That way we can move forward. These were all words Mr. Guez spoke to Joseph. At the time, Joseph did not understand the meaning of these words, but he kept them in his heart. In about a year, the world economy slowly recovered. Joseph woke up from his reverie and planned what to do next. Since my card block was lifted, I could use my family's assets. So the first thing I do is buy wedding jewelry for my wife. Joseph took out his premium black card. Each side of the card was black. The edges were gold-plated and looked perfectly assembled, with the number 99 stamped. It gave a sense of luxury to the person holding it. The number 9 symbolizes luxury. Caddy and I have been married for so long, and I haven't given her any precious gifts. So, this is my chance to make up for it. Joseph stopped the taxi and went to a very fancy jewelry store. The taxi stopped at Gold Jewelry. Joseph got off and went straight in. He didn't know much about jewelry, but one thing he did know was that jewelry was a luxury item. Joseph wandered inside the store, finally walking to the center and finding the gold shop. "Excuse me, I want to buy a set of expensive jewelry. This is my card. Swipe it?" Joseph said to a female employee as he handed her his card. "Are you sure?" asked the female employee while looking sarcastically at Joseph. She didn't believe Joseph after seeing how he didn't look like a rich man. "What do you mean?" Joseph was dumbfounded. He was confused. "This whole set of jewelry costs about $100 million. I'm not sure you can buy it. I'm guessing that you're a thief, right?" The employee gave Joseph a cynical look. "I've come across people like you many times. Usually, people like you would lie to me and then steal jewelry." The female employee named Celine gave Joseph a sharp look. Joseph was dumbfounded. He nodded and tried to confirm that he was not a thief. Joseph took out his black card and placed it on the display case. "Quick! Swipe the card. This is..." Celine's eyes were glued to the black card, her expression looking very tense. At first, she thought she had seen the wrong thing, but then she thought for a moment, and her eyes rounded wide. She could hardly believe it. "This is the black card with the highest limit. It's a black card from the World Bank. How is that possible?" The employee didn't expect it at all. "Global Supreme Black Card, with a credit limit of 100 billion and no interest. Yes, you're right. You can trust me now that this card is mine. Quickly get a set of jewelry for me, and I will pay for it using the balance on this card," Joseph said. "Ah, yes, sir," Celine said quickly. Celine sprang into action, grabbing the small machine and swiping the black card with trembling hands. Then Joseph entered his birthday password. The machine beeped, signaling a successful transaction. "Wow, this is his card," said Celine to herself. She had no idea that Joseph was such a rich man. Celine immediately gave his wife the box of jewelry that Joseph had bought for her. Joseph took the jewelry box. Joseph prepared to go to his wife's office. Caddy worked as an accountant in a financial company in the city. Her monthly income was about $200,000. Although her salary was very high, because she used the money for daily household needs, Caddy could not save much. About 20 minutes later, Joseph arrived at the office where Caddy worked. Inside Caddy's room, a conversation took place between her and an old friend of hers. "Caddy, we were classmates in university about 5 years ago, and we've known each other ever since. What I just said is for your good," said a woman in front of Caddy. The woman was dressed in formal brown clothes, with black hair arranged behind her head. Her makeup was not too thick, and her face looked beautiful. Her body exuded an aura of great authority. Victoria Thurs was the CEO of the Thurs company where Caddy was working. She was advising Caddy to divorce Joseph and marry a richer man. "What do you think Joseph has in common? He's just a pain in the ass," Victoria said. She continued, "You've been married for almost a year, yet he hasn't given you anything, including jewelry. Is he a real man? He doesn't even have a steady job yet." "Victoria, Joseph loves me. Don't say that about him. Caddy pursed her lips. She looked upset. Caddy, how old are you? Why are you so innocent? You really believe in love?
Victoria sneered.
She folded her arms over her chest and said again to Caddy, these days, there's money and then there's love. Without money, how can you strengthen your love? Can a poor man like Joseph give you happiness with love alone?
Victoria.
Caddy was about to argue, but Victoria interrupted her first. For example, one of the men who pursued me was the son of Andrew Maxim, a prominent company owner in this city. He gave me a luxury car just to get my love. Even though I have no feelings for him, what he gave me was a luxury car. As for Joseph, he's useless. He can't give you anything. Is he qualified to give you love? Victoria continued. Caddy, you are very beautiful. Better divorce Joseph and marry a rich man.
Victoria concluded.
Victoria, I'm not interested in fancy cars and wealth. I just like being with Joseph and living a simple life. Joseph is very good to me. Caddy looked serious in her answer. Caddy continued, Victoria, we are good friends. I don't want to hear you ask me to divorce Joseph again. I don't want to break our friendship just because of this. Caddy's tone sounded firm, earnest, and not pretending. Victoria did not speak again. She sighed. She just didn't understand what Joseph had that made Caddy love him so much. Miss Victoria, there is a man named Joseph outside. He says he is Caddy's husband. He wants to come in and see Caddy, said Victoria's assistant, who suddenly entered the room. Joseph is here? Caddy and Victoria were both dumbfounded. Let him in, Victoria said reluctantly. In her heart, she really looked down on Joseph. She was disgusted when she saw Joseph. The last time they met was when Caddy married Joseph. However, Victoria only came to give a wedding gift to her best friend, Caddy. After that, she went home and did not follow the wedding party until it was over. After a few seconds, Joseph walked into Caddy's room carrying a jewelry box. His smile had not stopped since then. Honey, why are you here? Asked Caddy. She stood up and greeted her husband happily. Honey, I just bought a gift for you, so I couldn't wait to give it to you, Joseph replied. He smiled and handed her the jewelry box. Joseph promised himself that from today on he would give Caddy a better life. That's very expensive jewelry, Victoria said to herself. She was surprised after glancing at the logo of the jewelry box's packaging. Caddy covered her mouth as she was surprised by the gift her husband had brought her. She knew that the jewelry was very expensive. Caddy's eyes were teary with emotion. When we got married, I didn't buy you jewelry like this diamond, right? Now I will make up for it. Joseph touched his wife's head and smiled warmly. Ha ha! Joseph, do you take Caddy for a fool? How dare you use this trick to play with her feelings? Victoria sneered. She took a step forward and mocked Joseph. Tell us where you bought this fake jewelry? Victoria's eyes bulged. She was not sure if Joseph could afford such an expensive piece of jewelry. Because of Victoria's raised voice, it made all the employees in the office witness it. I'm not going to discuss the fact that you're poor, but I didn't expect you to buy a fake and give it to your wife in a public place like this. Shameless, said Victoria. It's said that Caddy's husband is a useless and poor man. He doesn't even have a regular job, the employees whispered. Suddenly, the office was full of whispered murmurs. They looked at Joseph with looks of contempt and scorn. Joseph opened the jewelry box. He took out a set of necklaces and put them directly onto his wife's neck with great pleasure. Caddy was still speechless as she was amazed to see real diamonds on her necklace. Everyone in the office looked at Joseph with a look of disbelief. They were shocked and astonished. The box of jewelry was really bought by Joseph. As a matter of fact, a minute ago Joseph showed a paper with official proof that he had bought the jewelry. No way! Victoria shook her head. She couldn't believe that Joseph could afford $1 billion worth of jewelry. Honey! Caddy's eyes widened. Her small mouth opened slightly as she was moved at this moment. Caddy even thought that her husband had won at gambling, or maybe won the lottery. Because, other than that, how else could Joseph buy such expensive jewelry? Everyone in the office was whispering and wondering where Joseph got that much money from. However, there was no confirmation from Joseph. This was because he was too lazy to talk to them. Joseph took the jewelry box and gave it to Caddy with a smile. Joseph said gently, "Honey, I've been married to you for a long time, and in all that time I've never given you a gift. So, this is the first gift I've given you. I love you. Thank you for being my wife, and for always being patient with a husband like me. Once again, thank you very much," Joseph continued. "Thank you, honey," Caddy replied. Her eyes flushed with happiness, and tears trickled down her cheeks. She opened her arms and hugged Joseph. "Look, how happy is she? Of course she's happy. Her husband gave her such a precious gift in front of all the employees in the office. When can I meet a good man like Joseph?" All the female employees were currently praising Caddy and Joseph because their actions were very romantic. Moreover, with Joseph giving the expensive jewelry, it made them want to someday have a husband like Joseph. "Time to work," Victoria snapped at the employees who were still looking at Caddy and Joseph. She glared at the whole crowd. At the moment, Victoria was very upset. Seeing their boss upset, all the employees quickly averted their eyes. Some were afraid. Some immediately returned to their seats to resume their work. Caddy asked Joseph about his doubts. "Honey, where did you get the money to buy this jewelry?" "I went to the lottery store today. I bought one ticket and won $1 billion. Joseph smiled. He would not tell Caddy about his family's confiscated wealth being returned by the state. Joseph didn't tell his wife first because he thought it wasn't time yet. The next day, Caddy, who had already left for work, called Joseph. "Honey, my father is hospitalized," Caddy told Joseph in a worried voice. "Why are you suddenly hospitalized? Weren't you in good health before?" Joseph asked. "I don't know the exact reason. Right now I'm on my way to Rose Hospital. Hurry up and catch up with me, honey." Caddy was heard crying. "Okay, I'll catch up with you soon," Joseph replied frantically. After hanging up the phone, Joseph took a taxi to Rose Hospital, which was about 10 minutes away from his house. Although Joseph was not very fond of his father-in-law, he was also family, and Joseph felt worried when his father-in-law was hospitalized. After asking the nurse, it turned out that Mr. Barta Smith was admitted to a room on the 6th floor. Joseph immediately went there using the elevator. Rose Hospital was the largest hospital in the city, and it had many patients. After getting to the 6th floor, Joseph immediately looked through the window of the room where his father-in-law was being treated. He saw Mr. Barta Smith lying on the bed with an oxygen tube in his nose. His face was pale, his breathing was labored, and his eyes were tightly closed. Caddy, Jenny, Lucky, and the rest of the Smith family had already arrived. They were sitting in front of Mr. Barta's room. Everyone gave Joseph a dismissive look. "Ha ha, this poor son-in-law came too." Mr. Bura Smith, who was Mr. Barta Smith's younger brother, said so when he saw Joseph's arrival. "Honey," Caddy's eyes cracked. Her tears were flowing. She immediately ran to hug Joseph. Caddy's body trembled and her voice choked. "The doctor said that Dad's condition is very serious. Father had a heart attack. It's okay." Joseph patted his wife's back gently while trying to comfort her. This poor son-in-law still has the self-awareness to come visit my father." Jenny sneered at Joseph. She looked at Joseph again and said, "You weren't part of the Smith family from the start, but you're late to visit your father-in-law. You really don't seem to care about your father-in-law's condition." "Jenny, I had a traffic jam on the way. That's why I'm late," Joseph replied. Joseph tried to explain, but Jenny interrupted him immediately. "I don't care about your excuse. I just know that you came late. I know what you came late for. You must have been waiting for my father to die, right?" "That's right," what Jenny said. "You knew that your father-in-law was sick, but you came to visit him late, Joseph. You didn't treat your wife's family well." The rest of the Smith family scolded Joseph. "Without the Smith family, you might starve to death on the streets." Jenny continued to berate Joseph. "Stop. Don't scold my husband. He came late by accident. Besides, our father is still sick. It's better to focus on praying for him to get better soon, Caddy said. Already, don't scold Joseph again, said Lucky, smiling. He was wearing a suit, a leather bag hanging from his waist. His back looked broad and authoritative, just like a boss. You know that Joseph doesn't have a car, so he can only take a taxi. Of course the road is jammed. Ha ha, Lucky continued. He glanced dismissively at Joseph. His gaze looked very insulting. Joseph and Caddy could only remain silent. Lucky said again, "Let me talk for a moment. Dad's surgery costs about $300 million because he needs a liver transplant. I don't think it's expensive, but since Joseph is also a son-in-law in this family, then I hope that Joseph can also contribute money to pay for father's surgery." Lucky smiled. "I know that Joseph doesn't have much savings, so I will pay the $200 million. Joseph will pay the rest, so Joseph will only pay $100 million. Are you willing, Joseph?" Lucky continued. He felt proud and smiled condescendingly at Joseph. $100 million? Caddy's eyes widened. Her savings in the bank were only $20 million. Where did she and her husband get the $100 million from? Joseph frowned, and Lucky said again, "Why, Joseph? You're really poor. $200 million you can't even spend. Look at me. I'm the only son-in-law who can afford to spend more. You are really a poor son-in-law?" All the Smith family members said to Joseph,